Why didn't you guys help fight Thanos? Or any war, all the other terrible things throughout history?
We were instructed not to interfere in any human conflicts unless deviants are involved.
By who?
Hey guys, Smiling Reviewer here, and today we are talking about Eternals. Eternals is directed by Chloe Zhao and is the newest entry in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and the story follows the Eternals, a group of immortal beings with superhuman powers who have secretly lived on Earth for thousands of years. Okay, so I was pretty nervous entering this movie because I saw this a little bit late, and I saw that the reception to this movie was very divided, some loving it, some hating it, which is not uncommon, art is subjective. But I saw one of the main debates being this doesn't feel like a Marvel movie. Marvel have really stepped away from their traditional storytelling. And some loved that, some hated that, but that was what I read prior to seeing this movie. But I'm gonna be completely honest here, when the credits started rolling at the end of this movie in my IMAX theater, my first thought was, I am so confused. Not because of anything that happened in the movie though, but because the movie felt very much like a Marvel movie. I'm honestly confused where that debate of it not being a Marvel movie came from, because it felt a lot like a Marvel movie. Like, you've got your standard quippy Marvel humor that we all know now. You've got your super flashy CGI fight scenes. You've got your world ending in a few days and we have to band together to save it type deal. It was a Marvel movie. And there's nothing wrong with that. I just found that funny because I was expecting something vastly different. In saying that though, I still very much enjoyed this movie. I didn't love it or anything, but I thought it was really cool and an interesting enough story. I think this movie's main issue was it's such a grand story with so much history. It literally spans over 7,000 years, and it also has so many characters to introduce that I imagine it would have been quite a challenge for Chloe Zhao to condense that even into a movie as long as 2.5 hours, especially only having worked on smaller films before in her past. But in my opinion, she actually managed to pull it off pretty decently. The focus of the movie is definitely the Eternal known as Cersei, played by Gemma Chan, and a majority of the movie is told through her point of view. But despite the other Eternals definitely feeling like they're a bit more on the sidelines, I felt they actually did a pretty good job at fleshing them out as much as they could with the little time they had to do so. And a big part of that was because all the Eternals were played by such an incredible set of actors. If there were two things that were absolutely on point in this movie, it was the casting and the cinematography. I was originally planning on just talking about a few of the Eternals, but they were honestly all so great, and it's such an interesting and diverse cast that I want to mention them all, but I'll keep the standouts for last. Salma Hayek as Ajax, the leader of the Eternals, was really cool, but she was probably the one more important character I could have just used a bit more development and screen time for. Richard Madden as Icarus was fantastic. His character is basically the Marvel equivalent of like Superman, and my god, I am gonna preface this next statement by saying I'm completely straight, but I'd be lying if I said that man didn't make me feel things. No, but honestly, he's such a great actor. He has such a great presence, and without spoilers, I really loved the route they took his character in terms of moral and emotional conflict. Gemma Chan as Cersei did a great job as our film's lead. I really liked her performance. I thought she did a good job at playing that just morally strong and compassionate character. Kumail Nanjiani as Kingo, an eternal turned famous Bollywood actor, was a great addition to the cast. Of course, he was hilarious, and he also just played off the other cast members so well. His character also has a valet, played by Harish Patel, that follows him around to film a documentary on the Eternals, and he was just absolutely hilarious. Definitely one of the funniest parts of the movie was the back and forth between those two characters. Brian Tyree Henry as Phastos was such an interesting character that I wish we could have seen more of as well. And his superpower is basically the power of technology, I guess you'd call it. It was interesting how they show he influenced some modern inventions, but I especially liked a particular scene he had where he realizes some of the horrible negative consequences that come from technological advancements, and it was just a really powerful scene. Ma Dong-seok as Gilgamesh, man, I was so happy to see this guy in this movie. And I like to think Chloe Zhao was like, I need to cast someone as Gilgamesh, the Eternal whose superpower is like the strongest punch, and then saw that scene in Train to Busan where he just punches through all the zombies and was like, that's our fucking guy. No, but in all seriousness, I loved every scene he was in. I thought he did such a good job in his role, and I especially loved his relationship with Thena. And Thena is played by none other than Angelina Jolie. And can you believe that? Angelina Jolie is now a superhero in the Marvel universe. I just thought that's so cool, and she was so good as well. She never felt out of place or anything. She really made the character her own, and as I said before, I loved her relationship with Gilgamesh, and I really wish they could have explored that dynamic a bit more. I honestly would have watched a movie just about those two characters. Lauren Ridloff as Makari was awesome as well. She was another Eternal I felt we really didn't get to see that much of at all. I think she probably had the least development out of all of them, but Lauren Ridloff was just so charming the way she played the character, and I also loved how they depicted her super speed, but I'll get onto that later. I'm starting to realize a bit of a recurring theme as I'm talking about each of these Eternals, that they just didn't seem to get that much development, and I guess that was actually more of an issue than I thought it was in the movie, so I don't know, take that as you will. But anyways, the two biggest standouts for me out of all the Eternals were, funnily enough, the Eternals played by the actors I knew the least about, and that was Sprite and Druig. Sprite is played fantastically by Leah McHugh, and she was such an interesting character because on the surface, she's this very whimsical and snarky character, but then you realize even though she looks like a child, she's technically thousands of years old, just like the rest of the Eternals. But she's cursed with the physical appearance of a 12-year-old. And the way they portrayed that conflict was really cool because she's forever cursed with being treated as a child and never seen as an adult, which is actually quite tragic when you think about it. And that was just a really interesting approach that I never really thought about. And the other unexpected standout was Barry Keoghan as Druig. His power is that he can basically mind control people, and he faces the moral conflict of when the humans evolve to a time when they start having war and conflict, he literally has the power to just make them all stop, but he's not allowed to because the Eternals are not allowed to interfere with human conflict to ensure that humans have a natural evolution. And I just loved any of the scenes that got into that moral debate, and I especially loved his performances. This movie is absolutely gorgeous as well. Chloe Zhao really pushed for this movie to be filmed on location as much as possible, meaning minimal use of green screens and CGI, and it only works to benefit the movie. There are some absolutely beautiful shots in this movie. I also really bloody loved the portrayal of all the unique powers, and I think that was a major reason I enjoyed this movie a lot, despite it still feeling a bit like a generic Marvel movie. The action scenes were so cool and so exciting. All the Eternals' powers were such a joy to watch, especially seeing them work together and seeing their powers in tandem was so cool. I loved seeing Kingo's finger guns. I guarantee every child who saw this movie that ever ran around shooting imaginary bullets out of their fingers had the same thought as me of just, damn, that's pretty fucking cool. Makari had the coolest scenes though. They did a great job at making a speedster look super cool and unique, despite the fact that we've seen them so many times with all the iterations of the Flash and Quicksilver. But yeah, her action scenes were probably my favorite. She was bloody awesome. The main villain of the movie is the Deviants, which are these invasive creatures that the Eternals' purpose is to exterminate. And I kind of wish they did a bit more with the Deviants. They started to build a really interesting storyline where it kind of implies that perhaps they were just fighting for a home. Just because they look scary and evil doesn't necessarily mean they are scary and evil. Like, they're just another race of beings that want a home. But in the end, not much is done with that idea, and it turns out they pretty much are just scary and evil. But yeah, it was a really unique story overall, and I loved the sequences throughout the movie where we got glimpses into different periods of the Earth's history, such as ancient Babylon, and how the Eternals played a part in it. And I thought these sequences were just so much more interesting and compelling than anything else that was set in the modern day. So I wish we could have seen more of that and more of the debates about humanity and what's considered right and wrong, because those were my favorite parts of the movie. But I'm definitely interested to see this cast return and to see where they take these characters from here. So Eternals gets a 7 out of 10 from me. If I'm completely honest, the spectacle and the visuals was a major reason I loved it. I'm not sure if I'll enjoy this movie as much watching it at home as opposed to in IMAX. But anyways, thanks for watching this one, guys. I hope you enjoyed this review as much as I enjoyed making it. If you did enjoy it, don't forget to leave a like below and subscribe for more content, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. See ya!